let's have a little test. If you can all hear me well, and if you can also all ideally see the first slide of the introduction presentation, can you kindly type into the chat box a yes or a smiley, whatever you prefer, just so I know, okay, we have one yes. Excellent, smileys, yeses, lovely. Okay, thank you. So I assume it's all working very well. So let's get started. Thank you all for joining our webinar, Solid Problem, Real Solutions. As you can see from the lovely pictures on the introduction slide, we will be talking about waste in pit latrines. I am your moderator today. My name is Alice. Now let me see if I can, yes, perfect. Let's start before we get into the fun part. Let's start with a little guidance. You are all muted already. This is great. Please keep it this way. Of course, if you have a USB headset, go ahead and use it. It reduces the feedback. Also, if you have any questions to me or to the speakers throughout the webinar, you can type your questions into the question bar and we will try to answer all of them, maybe not within this webinar, but on the Sustainable Sanitation Alliance website in a forum discussion. So all your questions will be heard and taken up, and we will share the link with your questions on the Susanna page after this webinar. Also, you are being recorded, so we can upload this webinar on the same Susanna page that I just mentioned. If you wish to not be recorded, I must kindly ask you to leave this webinar now, and then you can listen to the webinar once the recording is uploaded on the Susanna website. So, this is today's agenda. What I'm doing right now is the introduction, and then we will hear from the GIZ colleagues in Burkina Faso, their take on the situation, followed by a colleague from BORDA Zambia, and it will be all wrapped up by our colleague in Uganda. So we will dive into the three countries shortly. Each speaker will have about 10 to 15 minutes of presentation time. And if we have more time afterwards, we will take a couple of questions from both channels. So we might take 1 or 2 questions from each channel. And as I just said, all the other questions will be answered in a thread or forum discussion on the Sustainable Sanitation Alliance website, which I'm sure you all know. So the stars of the show today are, first of all, from Burkina Faso, Shurstine Somé. She is a technical advisor for sanitation at GIZ and has been working in Burkina Faso since 4 years with us. She has all in all 15 years of experience in water and sanitation management in rural and urban areas. She has a master's degree in sanitary and environmental engineering and a master's research in environmental health, and now listen, toxicology and ecotoxicology. Shurstine is convinced that women have the capacity and an essential role to play in the development of innovative solutions for sanitation. Afterwards, we will be hearing from our dear Aubrey Simwambi, who is a mechanical engineer by profession and also has a master's degree in renewable energies engineering, so another sector. He has been working for BORDA Zambia since 7 years, where he is responsible for research, technical project design and supervision, post-project implementation monitoring, and the development and facilitation of training in the fields of on-site sanitation, fecal sludge, and solid waste management, which is the topic of today's webinar. Special thanks to Aubrey, who just spontaneously jumped in as a speaker just last week. So thank you so much, Aubrey, for being so flexible. And then we have our dear faithful Atusinguza, who is a technical advisor in Uganda for the GIZ program, Enhanced Water Security and Sanitation, and she's been working with the program since 4.5 years. Faithful is passionate about public health and environmental protection. She has a Master of Science in Water and Environmental Management and a bachelor degree in Environmental Health. She believes in establishing strong institutional frameworks and service delivery systems for sustainability of WASH intervention. On the French channel, we have Jan-Christophe Peltz, who is our interpreter today and who is doing a wonderful job. I am Marietje Brandt. I am advisor to the Sanitation for Millions global program since 2 years. What else? That's it. Now let me quickly change to our first presentation, which will be the one from Burkina Faso. So, there we go. Shurstine, if you're there, please, you may now unmute yourself and present for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Shurstine Somé from Burkina Faso. Before we begin in this webinar, I would like to apologize already for my English. I'm a French speaker. And many thanks to Alice and Nora for preparing this webinar. And thanks for all participants. I prepared this presentation with Ida Wandaogo, in charge of a sanitation component in JZ Burkina Faso, and Jacqueline Wedraogo, technical advisor, and Isabelle Tony, who is our intern. Alors, slide 2, please, Alice. This slide, I'll talk. Hello?
Yes.
Okay. I'll talk about our framework condition and challenge for the wash sector in Burkina Faso. And the diagram is my right. Represent the access to water and sanitation in urban area in Burkina Faso. Alors, projections indicate that in 2030, almost 10 million people will have access to water, while only 3 million people will have access to sanitation at the same time. It is therefore necessary to accelerate progress in the on-site sanitation system. And this is the reason for the project objective, which is to accelerate the scaling up of drinking water supply and sanitation in urban area by promoting employment. We are focused on on-site sanitation because sewage system is too expensive for our country. We are working in 4 small and middle towns, which are Diebugu, Hunde, Toma, and Dano. Slide 3, please. In slide 3, we have made a national diagnosis of the fecal sludge management in our 4 towns. Here are some of the results about solid waste part in Pit Latrines. We have got 32% of people who agree that they throw solid waste in the pit latrine. When people are asked why they put solid waste in pit latrine, they say that it's fear of injuries, bottles, and other sharp objects, lack of solid waste management structure, and convenience of pit latrine. Another research carried out by Hopkins University show that 19% 19% women dispose their used material in pit latrine. Why do they do this? It's lack of disposal options, sterility risk when burning menstrual hygiene material products, and there are also deficient household waste collects. Another a type of menstrual material used is sanitary pads, clothes, cotton wool, other materials, tampon, toilet paper, for materials, natural materials. When we ask people what kind of waste they put in pit latrine, we have in total 94% person who puts in latrine organic waste, and we have non-organic waste like 19% of non-organic waste. Another slide, please. When we do a typology of non-organic waste, we have broken bottles, we have also drugs, stabbing weapons, and syringe, and other non-organic waste. We have also risk for pit emptier, waste clogs, the compressor of truck of pipes, and we have injuries for manual emptying. Which are implications for us? It's difficult in processing and recovery. We have a problem need for systematic separation of hygiene sludge, and also we have high cost and impossibility for us to do the test on post-treatment hygiene fecal sludge, which we have another problem is accumulation of fecal sludge in drying bed, because in Burkina Faso we have drying bed, not concrete wetland like in other countries. We have also difficulties in fecal sludge recovery in our country. Alors, which are our solutions for resolve this problem? Our solution is, Alice, another slide, please. Alors, our solution in Burkina Faso are, in the first one, awareness campaign for behavior change, household awareness. The second is incorporation of menstrual waste in waste management planning schemas, informs measure and improve regulation, promotion of reusable and user-friendly sanitation pads, improvement and monitoring of solid waste management structure, and the compliance at the household level. We have also research and development to improve the capture of waste before deposit on drying bed. And finally, we ask a question for all the participants. Is it possible to stop the promotion of dry pit latrine in our country? Is it the solution, the end solution? That is our questions. Thank you for your attention. Alice?
Yes, wow, lovely. Thank you so much, Shurstine. You did a great job ending your presentation with the question to all of us. Thank you, food for thought. So, without further ado, we'll end this now. And also, by the way, to all the participants, we will upload all the presentations also afterwards on the Susanna page. So now we move from Burkina Faso on to Zambia. Aubrey, whenever you're ready, the stage is yours.
I'm Lady Alice. Hi, everyone. I'll give you a presentation on the Zambian perspective, especially for Lusaka. So in Lusaka, we have two FSM projects which have been piloted for the past 8 years, but they've faced many operational challenges from emptying of sludge to reuse and disposal. So as Lusaka is undergoing what we are calling the Lusaka Sanitation project, where we are also upscaling fecal sludge management services, we wanted to identify the challenges from household up to reuse and disposal. So we undertook a study which adopted 4 approaches. One approach was measuring the solid waste in pit latrines, and this was done during the pit emptying services. When the pit empties were emptying, we removed the solid waste from that was coming from the pits, and we measured the wet solid, the mass of the wet solid waste. The second one, with the Lusaka Sanitation Project, we conducted surveys, about 4,000 surveys from 3 peri-urban settlements. In Lusaka, we have about 33 settlements, and about 17 settlements, they are peri-urban settlements. These are like informal and unplanned settlements. So in this one, we chose 3 settlements, and these are Chazanga, lying in the north, Chawama in the south, and George, which is more like in the central part of the city. So in this one, we did 4 surveys, or 4,000 surveys for Chazanga and Chawama, and about 2,000 surveys for George. The third approach was to analyze field tests on pit emptying equipment, GIZ under the climate-friendly sanitation, invited various companies and their engineers who have developed pit emptying machines to try them out on the sludge coming from pit latrines in Lusaka. So in this one, we had the Gaupa, which came with the team from Uganda. We had the Flex X, which came from the US, and this one was also tested out in Malawi, where it performed very well. Then we had the EVAC MK3 coming from South Africa, and then we also compared the performance with what we are using in Lusaka, which we call the modified garden tools. These are like the shovels, the rakes, and the spades, which have been modified to enable the pit emptiers empty sludge from the pit latrines. We also did some surveys with the fecal sludge service teams. These are like the teams who are actually going into the compounds to empty the pit latrines. From the surveys that we conducted, the analysis showed us that about 80% of the households in peri-urban settlements, they are using pit latrines. Then the other 20%, they are using flush systems, which means they have an interface which is like flushable, and then the effluent is going to either a septic tank or cesspool. From our findings, all the areas, no matter if the area is using flash systems or pit latrines, we found that solid waste is thrown into the pit latrines. About 1% of solid waste is thrown into end up in the pit latrines. When we did an analysis of how much solid waste is actually going into the pit latrines, we found an average of 150 kg solid waste per cubic meter of sludge that is emptied. And this came especially from areas with no solid waste management services. Then we also found that the pits, the solid waste which is entering into the pit is mostly also in areas where people are likely to abandon the pit latrine once it is full. So, once it is full. So areas in which like people are able to allocate a pit when it's full to the next one, they are likely to combine to make the pit latrine also as a solid waste disposal unit. Next slide, please. Alice?
Yes, I have the next slide here. Can you see?
May I have the next slide?
Yes,
the first one.
You have it?
Yes, it's coming up. It's quite slow. Maybe it's my internet. Yeah.
Oh, maybe it's mine.
So, yes. Now, let me continue speaking. Okay, in case the slide is lagging, I'll continue speaking. So, to understand the effects on the pit emptying services, from like pit emptying to treatment and disposal, what we found out was that the solid waste increases the pit emptying time more than twice. This is because first, the pit emptiers, they need like fresh water to dilute the sludge in the pit so that at least they can easily scoop it out. Then also they need to puncture the side of the pit latrine, as you can see on the top left picture. They need to puncture the pit latrine, start emptying, and when they have finished emptying, they need to also mend the ore and also disinfect the soil around where they were emptying. The next one was that the solid waste increases failure of innovative technologies. This is because the solid waste tends to clog the pathways for the sludge. And this one, it combines with the first point. So for the innovative technologies to work effectively or efficient, they also needed to dilute the sludge, and then the technology, the machine needed to have a high suction power. This brought up also lots of challenges, because for it to have high suction power, it needed high amounts of energy, and this caused challenges in some electrical equipment. Some of them even failed maybe twice or thrice in the field. When it comes to treatment, the cost of treatment increases because you need extra personnel at the treatment plant. You need about 2 to 3 people when you bring the sludge to wash out the solid waste out of the sludge, and also you need to save some income for solid waste transportation from the treatment plant to the disposal site. When the solid waste is taken to the disposal site, you find that it increases the risk to public health, because at the dump site you find scavengers who are like scavenging from trucks which are coming from shopping malls, and these they come with food, and usually they are just disposing them in the dumpsite, and people are going there to pick valuable things that they think they are valuable to them. And sometimes you never know that where they put this solid waste which came from pit latrines might be where they could also dispose the stuff which is coming from the malls. Then the solid waste also affects the use of dry sludge as soil conditioner, because once the sludge is dried, it is sold to some farmers. But usually you find that not all solid waste is removed out of the sludge, and once there are some small maybe plastics or inorganic stuff, usually the market value of the soil conditioner goes down because no one wants to get it from the treatment plant. Next. Then we drew some lessons out of we found from the households and also from the pit temperatures. Solid waste is disposed into pits mostly by households lacking solid waste management options. Then high amounts of waste are prevalent in pit latrines as compared to flush systems, and this is because usually pit latrines, they have like a huge hole for the interface. So whatever solid that the household wants to throw into the pit, it can go in. But when it comes to flush systems, they can only throw in things which can be easily flushed by a 9-liter system. Then with most households, you find that menstrual health and hygiene products are the prevalent solid waste found in pit latrines. Even the households with like perfect solid waste management services, still menstrual health and hygiene products end up in the pit, in the latrines, or in other containments or storage facilities. Then when it comes to the treatment plant, there's high need of operations and maintenance for not only for the treatment plant, but also for on-site sanitation facilities. This is because when solid waste is thrown into these facilities, the filling up rate is quite high. You find that in households with solid waste management services, the containment facilities might take maybe 4 to 8 years to fill up. But households which are throwing the solid waste into the pits, the average filling up was about 3 years, which means every 3 years, no matter how big the containment facility might be, it needs to be removed. Then there's high risk of contamination for operators. That is coming from pit emptying to treating of the solid waste at the treatment plant, because sometimes you might find that people they might even throw something as big as a blanket. Now, to remove that thing out of the pit latrine, it causes high risk because they will be pulling it out and they will be splashing of fecal sludge at the containment facility, and also during washing, you also need huge amounts of fresh water to wash out the sludge from from the solid waste. Then we came up with recommendations. Next slide, please. We came up with recommendations because you find that in areas where maybe the solid waste is not managed, it's due to lack of understanding of the laws. So one day, the first recommendation we made here was that countries need laws and standards for sanitation systems And these laws and standards must be adequately enforced. You might find that the laws are there, people are not aware of the laws and they don't know the implications of going against the law. So it's very important that the law must be adequately enforced. Then community awareness on solid waste management must be enhanced, but enhancement or community awareness should not just be a standalone. It should move parallel with waste collection, because where you are giving people options for solid waste management, and you find that they are going to follow the message. But if you just give them the message without giving them the service, the practice is going to continue. Then solid waste management must be planned in all future fecal sludge management projects. It could be that solid waste management services must be handled hand in hand with fecal sludge emptying services. Then there should also be monitoring mechanism for solid waste management service providers, because in some areas you find that they say that, okay, there's a service provider, but this service provider never barely goes into the community to collect the solid waste. Hence, people will go back to their initial practices. Then the last recommendation is that small bore interface unit should be promoted, so that people should not be throwing large things into the OSS facilities. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Aubrey, for wrapping it up with your recommendations from Zambia. Excellent. So now all quickly look away, please, while I put up the last but not least presentation. 1 second, please. There we go. Now we have the case of Kampala presented to you by Faithful. Faithful, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Alice. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well. Thank you for pronouncing my name correctly.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Somé and Aubrey for already making my presentation pretty much easier.
Can you please move a bit closer to the microphone, Faithful?
For making my presentation, I was saying I'd like to thank Aubrey and Somé for making my work here much easier, because I realized we seem to have similar challenges or similar scenarios coming from Africa. So thank you, guys. I'd like to move to the next slide, please. Right. So here I just want to give a brief background on Kampala. Kampala is, of course, as you all know, the capital of Uganda, and we have a population of about 1.5 million people during in the evening, but during daytime that population doubles, and over 90% of the people in Kampala use on-site sanitation facilities, and 60% of the population, that's about 900,000 people, live in informal settlements, and these are generally characterized by poor fecal sludge management, issues around solid waste management, and most of the toilets are being shared in the informal settlements. So from our work here in Kampala, we have partnered with KCCA, that's the local authority in charge of the city, the Ministry of Water and Environment, and other key stakeholders for about 5 years now, and we've been mainly working towards trying to improve fecal sludge management in the city. However, you'll find that one of the challenges we face when it comes to fecal sludge management is the solid waste in pit latrines, and I'm glad that we have this kind of discussion where we can all learn from each other and possibly come up with a way forward on how this can be tackled and become history. So as I mentioned, solid waste in pits is one of the challenges when it comes to FSM, and it's a challenge at different stages of the sanitation chain. As my previous presenters have also mentioned, it's a challenge when it comes to the emptying process. I think Aubrey was elaborate enough at how it's a problem when you're emptying and you find huge chunks of solids and you have to stop the emptying because it's blocking the process. Then it also becomes a challenge when you get to the treatment plant, and also, as the rest have mentioned, a challenge when it comes to disposal, because nobody really wants this solid waste that has been contaminated with fecal sludge. And also, it's not clear where to dump this kind of waste, because ideally, at that point, it now becomes infectious and hazardous. Next slide, please. So the question is, why is it that we have this solid waste in the toilets, in the pit latrines? For the case of Kampala, and as everyone has also said, it's really because of the solid waste management practices that we have. In Kampala, the collection of solid waste is subcontracted to a private company by the local authority, and being a private company, they charge a fee to collect the solid waste. And when it comes to informal settlements, this fee is sometimes considered a bit higher or unaffordable for the dwellers. And also you find that because it's an informal settlement, accessibility to, let's say, the last house is a challenge because of the size of the trucks, and you find that some areas are not accessible. So the people who dwell in those far-to-reach areas, they end up looking for alternative solutions in how to manage their waste, and it's usually they end up dumping it in trenches or burning it, open burning, and of course the pit latrines are a good option for them. And then the other main contributing factor is the toilet user behavior of the people. You find that, of course, there are no direct costs incurred when you dump anything in a pit latrine, so it's considered cheaper to throw solid waste in the toilet. There's limited awareness to the impacts of that solid waste. We find that people are ignorant that when I dump solid waste in a pit, it has implications not only during emptying, but also at the treatment, and also on the quality of the fecal sludge when we're talking about the reuse options. So there's limited awareness in that area, and people do it out of ignorance that it really has their actions have adverse effects. Majority also of the toilets, as I mentioned, are shared, and so it's difficult to control the actions of everybody who is using the toilet. And at the same time, when it comes to tenancy practices here, the emptying of toilets. Emptying of toilets is really the responsibility of the landlords. Food may not always be the users of these toilets, so that the users are not the ones actually responsible for the emptying, which is also a challenge. And as Somé had mentioned earlier, some of the solid waste in the in the pits are menstrual pads and diapers. And for the case of Uganda, there are some taboos and cultural beliefs around someone else looking at your blood or your child's poo. So to avoid all that or to feel safe, people prefer to dump the pads and diapers in a pit latrine where nobody will see it. Next slide, please. So the question is, what are the implications of these actions? Solid waste in pits, as we all know here, is that it shortens the lifespan of the latrine. It also makes emptying difficult, as has been mentioned multiple times here. The time when you interact with the emptiers or the private operators, you find that they tell you when they go to a pit that has solid waste, they take much time emptying that pit, and then they are also exposed because they have to remove separate the solids directly, and this also is a risk to their health. Then it also increases the emptying costs in the sense that for Kampala, you find that sometimes the private operators end up charging an extra fee for this solid waste for them to take it away. And also, we have a new ordinance that has been developed, and it's really a specific ordinance targeting pickle sludge management. And you find that in that ordinance, we captured the aspect of trying to control the solid waste entering pit by increasing the cost that one has to pay for the solid waste. It's about 48 currency points, and this is ideally supposed to be paid by the landlord. It's quite a large sum of money, and so it will force the landlords and the tenants to control themselves, because if they have to incur this cost, then they have to self-regulate themselves at that point. Then also the implication is that the solid waste gets contaminated, making it hazardous and also requiring a special kind of treatment in the end. Solid waste here for the case of Uganda, we either bury it at the moment or it's taken to the treatment plant. And as I mentioned earlier, the treatment plant also has that challenge of how to deal with this waste. Usually they try to incinerate it. However, this also brought in a bit of issues around the quality of air, the air quality. So it was a challenge in that area. So those are some of the implications that we have when it comes to the solid waste in pit latrines. Next slide, please. Yeah, so what have we done, or what could be done in this regard? I think the approach and what the consensus is here in Kampala is to try and find ways of minimizing the amount of solid waste that enters the pit latrine. As I mentioned, one intervention that has come up is the ordinance, where there are those stringent measures around if they find that you have solid waste in a pit. However, also sanitation improvement and financing strategy is currently being developed, and in that strategy they capture solid waste in pits, because Kampala is saying that they do not want to have any more solid in pits. So in this strategy, they come up with clear ways on how they think this issue can be tackled. So one of the ways is really trying to minimize the amount of solid waste in pits entering the pit latrines, both at household level, at institutional level. And one of the key interventions that could be done is really, first of all, strengthening and improving solid waste management at community level, and also conducting behavior change campaigns I gave an example here of one campaign that has been successful in Kampala. It's called the Weyonje campaign. It's raising really awareness around fecal sludge management, and it has been successful because through this campaign, standard toilets are being constructed, monitoring and evaluation systems are being put in place so that there is quick reporting on any breakage of control. So behavior change campaigns that are well targeted, well packaged can be successful when it comes to trying to mitigate a challenge in the community. Then also promoting innovative technologies. I put a picture there of one of the technologies that we are currently promoting. It's called a Faso pan. This technology is in such a way that the hole is so small that you cannot put, as Aubrey was saying, blanket. If you have such a pit, a blanket, it's very difficult to fix a blanket in there or a bottle. So these are some of the innovative technologies that we're trying to promote, and I'm sure there will be even more once everybody gets the hang of it, of the implications of the challenge at hand. And then, of course, enforcement. As I mentioned earlier, the ordinance has clearly stipulates what are the penalties that you face when they find solid waste in your pits. And then another area that would also be emphasized is trying to control the solid waste that finally gets to the pit, because of course reducing the solid waste at household level is a process. So yes, the treatment plant will still be receiving some solid waste, but what could we do at the treatment plant? And one suggestion is, of course, incineration, putting up a proper incinerator that can burn the solids. Yeah. Next slide, please.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Faithful. And everyone else, thank you also for highlighting the similarities. I think we have seen that in terms of challenges and implications, the issue is quite similar in all three countries, whereas each country, basically, as the presenter said, came up with their own local and sometimes quite innovative solutions. So that was great. Thank you for this exchange. Now, let's see. We don't have any questions so far in the chat box because we've had, I think, lots of information that need to be digested now. And also we are coming to an end of our webinar, so this is absolutely fine. We will take, if you wish to continue this very interesting discussion, we will take it to the Susanna webinar, and I will, not the Susanna webinar, but the Susanna website, as I mentioned earlier, and we will send the link to the discussion on the Susanna website afterwards to all the participants. So thank you all. Thanks again to the speakers. Thank you all for listening. And oh, we actually have one question. Okay, let's take one question before we finish this webinar. We have here one person who was asking, Jocelyn Tsai, how long does it take to fish trash out in each country? So I suggest we start with maybe Aubrey. Do you want to react to this, or can you react to this? How long does it take to fish trash out? I guess it means, yeah, Aubrey, please.
Yes, so it depends on what trash is in the pit latrine. Mostly our pit emptying teams, they are giving the services in clusters. That is like 12 barrels, 24 barrels, and 32 barrels. So we do not fish out the the trash separately. We remove the sludge together with the solid waste at one go. So you find that for a 12-barrel pit, you find that they might take maybe about an hour to remove the sludge and the solid waste. Then they are going to separate the solid waste at the treatment plant.
Okay, thank you. Faithful, would you like to react to this as well? Do you have a comparison in terms of how long it takes in Uganda?
So in Uganda, we have two kinds of emptying technologies. We have the gulper, and this gulper will literally take up everything from the pit, even the solids. So it may not have a big challenge when it comes to at the point of emptying the toilet. However, when they get to a treatment plant, as Aubrey said, the gulper, this fecal sludge has to be separated from the solid waste that have been taken. So, but then when it comes to the vacuum trucks, this is where they have a big challenge because they can only take the fecal sludge, they can't take in the solid waste, and it usually takes them a long time, as we have said about. If they come to a site with a lot of solid waste, it takes them close to 2 hours to complete what they would have done in like 45 minutes.
Okay, thank you. And one last word to Shurstine. Would you like to answer this question? Shurstine, if you're still there, you're still muted. If not, you can. Yeah, there you go. Yes,
Hello?
please.
Hello?
Hi.
Okay. For the first question, in Burkina Faso, it depends of the depth of the pits, because we have pits like 20 meter or 3 meter. Like the price is what can I say? Alice?
Yes, please.
Okay. Can I speak in French, please?
Yes, you may answer in French, and then we write and then we will write the English. I will try to type in the English translation as best as I can into, but just answer the one question: how long it takes in Burkina Faso, and then we're good. Shoot.
Ok, d'accord. Donc pour la première question, le coût, ça dépend de la taille et de la profondeur de la fosse. Donc le coût, ça dépend de ça. Pour la deuxième question, est-ce qu'il y a un coût supplémentaire par rapport à ce que les vidangeurs trouvent des déchets dans les fosses? Il n'y a pas de coût supplémentaire. Il n'y a pas de coût supplémentaire, sauf il y a des discussions entre les vidangeurs et les ménages lorsqu'il y a des blessures, surtout pour les vidangeurs manuels. Donc c'est un peu ça la difficulté au Burkina Faso. Maintenant, il y a une question par rapport à l'excavation.
Shurstine, Shurstine, thank you. Oui. We need to wrap up now, so we can take this question to the discussion on the Susanna website, and there you can post your answers. Is that okay with you?
Yes, it's okay for me.
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone. This was great. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon again. Thanks again to the speakers, and thanks, of course, to our intern Nora, without whom this would all not have been possible. Goodbye.